Peace. So tonight I just wanted to, peace, Shop Prince. I wanted to just build, peace, Felicia. So tonight I wanted to go through today's mathematics and today's degree in the 1 to 40s and just share my understanding about about those things. So when I say today's mathematics, I'm specifically talking about the date. So you look at the number 14. 1 is knowledge, 4 is culture. So 1 and 4 equals 5. So in another way, it's like saying knowledge, culture, manifests power, or all being born to power. Sometimes people may say that, but they may not actually explain how knowledge, culture manifests power. They may not explain the process. And there's a lot of elements to that process. Just because a person knows something about culture, it does not automatically translate into no form of power. And that's evident by just engaging in some of the community members that live in our neighborhoods. You may know a lot of people that they're pretty knowledgeable about certain things about culture. I mean, when you look at just people of color or black people in America, we're experts on American society, American culture, customs, norms, all of that, because we've been indoctrinated into that. So we know about American culture. We have knowledge of that. When immigrants or travelers come to this country, if they want to know about the American landscape, ask a black person. Ask a person who's been here for generations that's been indoctrinated into this society, because we know this society like the back of our hand. Our survival has depended upon our ability to know how this society functions, right? So typically speaking, any minority group, in particular talking about black people, we have knowledge of this culture. We know about the ins and outs of this way of life, but that doesn't always translate into power, force and influence. It doesn't always translate into that. So what are some of the elements that allows a person's knowledge of culture to be able to manifest power? There has to be something that goes on. You know what I mean? So one of the things that I was having a conversation with somebody about earlier is, peace G, is I was talking about the importance of being involved in the political process, knowing what the political process is. Because when you look at politics, politics is the science of power and influence. That's what it is. So when you think about it, a politician is a person that uses politics to create policies that affect the people. And they're enforced by the police. So if you're not involved in knowing how political processes work, then you put yourself in a position where you're not able to leverage whatever sense of power that you actually have. Now, how does the political process work? I'm not just talking about voting. I'm talking about also being able to understand the roles and the responsibilities of the people who serve in public office in your local municipality, in your county, what their roles and responsibilities are. And then, considering things on a regional and a national level, but you first need to know what a person's job is in regards to representing you as a public figure. Because what this person's responsibility is they craft public policy. Now, a lot of times people have this mentality like, yo, I ain't into politics, I ain't this, that, and the third. But politics actually change the landscape where you live. And if you're not conscious or aware of what those policies are, then you're going to be in the losing end when it comes to resources, the way that they're allocated, how public space is used, even something as simple as zoning ordinances in your neighborhood. You know, you can go right down to your local library and look up the zoning ordinances and see that you may live in a community that's designated commercial / residential. So based upon where you literally live, you're able to create a business out of your home based upon the zoning ordinances and the way that your neighborhood is actually structured, right? At the same time, you have zoning boards. You have people in positions who can change that, who can literally change how neighborhoods are zoned when it comes to whether it's going to be commercial, whether it's going to be residential, whether it's going to be mixed use, or anything like that, right? So understanding how those political processes work gives you a sense to put yourself in a position where you recognize the power dynamics in your neighborhood, in your community, in your municipality, and in your county. If you're ignorant to that and you don't care, then you're constantly going to be on the losing end when it comes to the way that resources are going to be directed or allocated. You're going to be on the losing end when it comes to the way that your community is designed. Let me give you another example, right? If you look at the way streets, for example, infrastructure is designed in some communities, you may see signage up in some neighborhoods that says children at play, or it has a traffic sign in terms of what the speed limit is in this particular neighborhood, right? That's one way that block clubs or community members rally around certain public policies in order to change the landscape where they live. That wasn't just the work of one person that said, yo, we need a sign up because there's children playing here. No, it was an organizing committee of people that live in that neighborhood that came together and directly communicated with the public officials who represent their district, represent their area, and stressed to them the importance of that. A lot of times as constituents donating to their campaigns in order to get some of these things changed. And I'm just talking about signage, right? You may also see in some neighborhoods construction being done where you see streets deliberately being made thinner or more slim, or you might see streets being constructed more wide. You may even see when you come to an area where if you're going down a main street and you have an off street right here, you may see some construction deliberately done where you have a curb that veers out a little bit like this down into the side street. And that architecture is done deliberately. Deliberately. It's really a form of urban alchemy, so to speak. Because if you're coming down that main street, if you want to turn down that side street where they're striving to slow traffic, if you didn't have that curb veer out a little bit like this to go into that side street, a person can just drive and just easily make a turn without slowing down their speed. But those curbs are deliberately designed out like that because it forces a car to slow down in order to make a turn like that. So they deliberately design streets based on certain angles to slow traffic or to deliberately speed traffic up. You know, these type of decisions are made in rooms that people who not into politics and they don't care what's going on or whatever will never see. But yet, when these changes are actually made on a concrete level, now you got people who are reactionary and complaining about the things that's going on in their community, but they didn't want to be involved, at least in the sense of gaining knowledge of the political processes. Why am I talking about all of this? Because when you think about power or power dynamics, when you're thinking about influence or force, power dynamics in your community, in your neighborhood, are shaped by the knowledge of the culture, the way that the customs, the social norms, all of those various different aspects of people activities ultimately define what those power dynamics are going to be. If you are not knowledgeable of that, then you're going to be on the outside looking in. And one of the things that I've said many times for years is if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. You're on the menu. And a lot of times people are not invested in gaining more knowledge of culture or the people activities of how people conduct business, the things that they actually do, the things that they don't do. And because of that, they're not in the conversation in terms of shaping the power dynamics where they actually live. So in terms of today's mathematics being knowledge, culture, all being born of power, it's like knowing or having knowledge or being aware of culture, a person's way of life, or the various different people activities that people are invested in is not enough. It has to be able to translate into power. In order for you to translate that into power, you have to be involved in the political processes where you live. You have to be knowledgeable and aware of what is going on and what decisions are being made to change the landscape where you live, how certain resources are being allocated or directed into some communities that may not be yours, how certain decisions are made to change the ordinances, or you may see something in regards to tax breaks being given to some people, maybe because they're immigrants, right? And because of that, you may see an immigrant family open up a business. And right when that designated time period is up, where they're going to have to start paying taxes on that business because that was what the agreement was, that person that opened the business puts it in another immigrant family member's name. So now they benefit from the tax break in that community. You know, there's certain things that go on that if you're not in the know, or you don't recognize how these people activities or how this culture functions, you're not going to be in a position to be able to leverage the power dynamics and be a part of shaping the landscape where you live. You're just going to be a person or a people in a position that others are making decisions for, and you just have to live with whatever decisions that they make. You know? So there's two ways to really consider that. You know, one is about infiltrating these ivory towers, you know, striving to be involved in the political process in that capacity, running for public office, striving to put yourself in positions where you have these organizations, institutions, and agencies where you have a controlling voice. You know, that's one way. The other way is investing in your own organizations, institutions, and agencies in order to build them up so that you can develop that sense of leverage or power in order to shift the dynamics in your community, in your municipality, also in your county or your region, you know. And there's not one way that's just simply better than the other. People need to use both methodologies when it comes to strive and establish some sense of equity or equality in this society. So knowledge, culture, when we talk about today's mathematics, that is one of the things that was on my mind in particular, you know, in terms of just getting up to this morning and just thinking about things that I do on a daily basis and just being successful in my undertakings, recognizing that this is about power. This is about shifting not only the relationships in your community, but the dynamics in terms of the resources, the economy as a whole, the way that the institutions function, so that things could be much more equitable. You know, the reason why I mentioned the degree in relationship to this is because it's very significant. That 14th degree that I mentioned in the title of this video is the 14th degree in the 1 to 40s, and it asks the question, who are the 85%? Now the answer to that lesson is they are the uncivilized people, poisonous animal eaters, slaves from mental death and power, those who do not know the true and living God or their origin in this world and worship what they know not, who are easily led in the wrong direction but hard to be led in the right direction. So when we're talking about like the 85%, the 10%, the 5%, that's a sociological term. That's a sociological perspective. That's just saying, when we say 85%, we're talking about the masses of people, the majority of the masses of people who are essentially blind, deaf, and dumb. Not physically. You know, we're talking about blind, deaf, and dumb in terms of a lot of times they can't see what's right in front of them. Deaf, they can't hear or they're not listening. And dumb, they're illiterate. They're not able to actually articulate what's actually going on. And that is the majority of the masses of people. Most of the masses of people are easily led in the wrong direction. They're not being taught how to be critical thinkers. They're usually easily corralled, especially when it comes to religion, where you have this hierarchy structure, where you have somebody at the top that's telling them what to think and how to think it, and they're not investigating or researching anything outside of that. And they're very reactionary. You know, everything that you see online or on television, you know, they're easily moved by things like that, as opposed to being able to think with a clear head and critically analyze what's actually going on and make a decision for themselves. The majority of the people are like sheeple, you know? And one of the reasons why, when we think about knowledge culture or being aware of how people activities function in our community as well as our municipality and in our county or region, a lot of people are not knowledgeable about things like that because they are blind, deaf, and dumb. Because they've been taught that way since they were babies. And because of that, a lot of people are not accustomed to being able to think for themselves. And it requires a lot in order to break a person out of that type of indoctrinated mode for them to really just think an independent thought outside of the way that they've been brainwashed and indoctrinated. You know, when we talk about knowledge of self is not just a process of learning about things or considering things. It's also a process of unlearning many things, because all of us who are on this journey of being more self-aware and recognizing our purpose and our responsibility to the rest of the human family members and our planet, that journey starts with us unlearning a lot of the things that we've been indoctrinated to think. And the older people get, when it comes to the 85%, the more difficult it is to break that mode of an indoctrinated way of thinking. That's one of the reasons why, when you look at the 5%, our target demographic are the youth. That is our target demographic. It's not to say that we wouldn't teach adults or people who are older. It just requires much more in terms of the flexibility of their thinking in order for them to actually transform their way of life. It's much easier to reach the youth because when you just look at the life cycle or the lifespan of an individual, for example, if you're able to catch a youth who's been indoctrinated for maybe 15 to 20 years of their life, if the typical lifespan is 65 years, if they get it at that time, then they have much more of an opportunity to live the rest of their life knowing who they are with a sense of purpose, which means that they have a greater capacity to add on to the other human family members and to be more responsible for the planet Earth. It's much more of an opportunity to have your time well invested because they're younger. So if they get it at 20, and the lifespan is 65, for 45 years of their life, they're more likely to be a person who has knowledge of self, who is a productive member of the society, as opposed to you meeting somebody and they 50 years old, and it doesn't mean that they can't do anything at that age, but you're dealing with 50 years, a half a century of indoctrination. That's tough. That's tough to deal with. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. I mean, this person may have a lot of life experience that they're bringing to the table and a lot of clarity. And they may even be doing a lot of things in some capacity when it comes to what knowledge of self is. But when it comes to just looking at the life cycle of a human being, if that life cycle or that lifespan is 65 years and this person is 50, talking about they want to get knowledge of self now, it's going to be much more difficult, because now if they've been on some bullshit for half a century, it's going to require a lot to bring some sense of equity or equilibrium, or for them to add some contributions to this world within the next 15 years. If their life cycle is going to be 65 years, within the next 15 years, that's going to equal the 50 years of bullshit that they was on. But all of it, if they are committed and they're genuine, is going to be something that is a contribution to help make this world a better place than when they got here. So it's commendable, it's acceptable, but it's much more advantageous to strive to reach the youth, because they're more flexible in their thinking. If they're pre-adolescent or they're in those adolescent phases of their life, they're much more, even on a physiological level, thinking a little bit more independently, even if it's just all sensory and they just moving off of their feelings and shit, right? It still has an independent component to it. You know, some of y'all call it rebellion. You know what I'm saying? But it has a sense of independence. It has a sense of protest to it. And it's important to recognize those things, especially with our youth, because when you approach our youth from a strength-based perspective, as opposed to striving to demonize or to minimize or to look at certain qualities that they express as a deficit, then you can use those strengths and direct them in a positive way. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times you see youth and they see bullshit for what it is. They call it out. They may be protesting all the time in various different ways. They're not down with this, they're not down with that. That's a good thing, because especially if they're able to articulate how it is some bullshit and why they're not down with it. Our role in terms of recognizing the strength based in what they're doing is how to direct that sense of protest in a positive way. Yeah, I ain't down with the bullshit too, but here's a better way or a more effective way to position yourself when it comes to recognizing the bullshit. I ain't down with it either. But look at what I've learned in terms of the way that I need to protest or the way that I need to deal with this bullshit. You know? So a lot of youth, because they're still young, one of the things that I talk to them about is if you're 14, you have 14 books in your reference library of life right now. You got some answers in those books, because each year you've been here on the planet Earth, that's a book in your reference library of life. Right? But wouldn't it be intelligent to talk to a person that got 65 books, 70 books, 80 books? I was blessed to be able to have a great grandmother who had 106 books in the reference library of life before she passed on. You know what I'm saying? Before she transitioned, you know? And in hindsight, I invested a lot of time with her when I was young. But recognizing the value and the importance of that relationship now, as an adult, man, if I could go back and know what I know now, I would have been sitting there asking her 1,000 questions. as opposed to 100 questions, you know, because each year you are on this planet is a book in your reference library of life. So with our youth, one of the things that I tell them is you have some answers in those books, especially in this social media age or generation, you know, but because your library is still growing, consult with those who have more books in their reference library of life, because they have answers that they may have come to a conclusion about 20 years ago that you're just thinking about for the first time today. So what ends up happening is when you're able to expand your reference library of life, you don't lose time searching for that does not exist. How would you get that information across to your old earth? How would I get it across to my old earth? I don't understand, Yabe. You may have to rephrase that question. But yeah, so with the young, I tell them, you have to expand your library of life. And you do that by consulting with people who have other books in their reference library of life. You talk to them about their life, about their experiences, you know. And at the same time, not only is it the responsibility to consult with those who came before them, but it's also important for them to continue on with that legacy and to expand their library of life. Because even if they got 65 books in their library, they may not have one book that you have in yours, even if you got 14. So you're entrusted with the responsibility of expanding the library or the legacy of your family. You know, so in part, as a 5%, that's one of the things that we do. That's why we focus so much on the growth and development of the youth, because they are the ambassadors of our future. And they have to be prepared in order to inherit this world and prepared for the relationship they need to have with our planet. You know, the world and the planet are two different things, you know? And too many of us adults and parents, either consciously or unconsciously, are not preparing a way for our youth to inherit this earth. Some of us have this mindset where it's like, yo, I got mine, I'm living my best life, and once I'm gone, fuck it. And that's how some adults and parents actually think. They're not thinking about or invested in the youth in a way where it's like, man, when I leave this place, I want it to be a better place than when I arrived here. And I'm entrusting you with this responsibility. Some people are not looking at the youth that way. They're looking at life is, I'm just going to have fun, party and bullshit, and do whatever I want individually. And once I leave, y'all can have this shit. You know? It's kind of like going to a club and just partying all night, and you dropping shit all on the floor, and you got bottles and stuff everywhere, and you just walk out the club, and you leave others to clean the shit up. You know, my mother's 50. I consult my grandmother who's 70. Okay, that's peace. You know, so that process is expanding our library of life. So going back to what I said about the 85%, you know, wherever you live at, whether you're here in America or if you're in any other country, 85% represents the majority of the masses of people demographically where you live who are blind, deaf, and dumb. That cuts across so-called racial lines, national lines, gender lines, age, social economic status, all of that. Group, the majority of the people where you live are blind, deaf, and dumb. So when we say 85%, that's what we're talking about. So it means many things to many different people. You know, if you live in Atlanta, right, the 85% where you live look different than if you live in Montana. Same demographic of people who are blind, deaf, and dumb, but the issues, the concerns, the disparities that you're going to see wherever you live at is going to be based around the idea that you have the majority of the masses of people who are blind, deaf, and dumb. And like I quoted in that degree, Who are the 85%? They are the uncivilized people, poisonous animal eaters, slaves from a mental death and power. It goes back to what I said originally about power. When it comes to the power dynamics where they live, they're dead to that. Mental death and power. Those who do not know the true and living God or their origin in this world and worship what they know not, who are easily led in the wrong direction, but hard to be led in the right direction. Well, why are they easily led? Well, if a person doesn't know their origin or their starting point, right? If you don't have a starting point or you don't know what your origin is, it's impossible for you to determine what is north, east, west, or south. It's impossible to determine direction because you have no point of origin, right? So I didn't say, so I said north, east, west, and south. That's news. They don't know the directions. They don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? So when a person doesn't have that point of origin, they don't have a sense of direction. This also means that they are disorientated. They have no sense of orientation. It's easy to take advantage of a person that is in a position like that. And they're always going to be easily led because they don't know what direction they're going in because they have no point of origin. They have no reference point. So when you think about the 85%, in order for you to identify your origin, you have to be a critical thinker. You have to be able to analyze and think through feelings and things that are deliberately appealing to your senses. You're going to have to be able to reasonably deduce what's actually going on around you. And if you're not literate, if you're not able to read on a functional level, there's a lot of things that's just going to go straight past you. So when you just consider the society on a national level, 37% of graduating seniors have a basic literate capacity. 37% of graduating seniors have a are basically literate. That's not even talking about above average literacy. I'm talking about standard literacy. 37%. That's terrible. And you see what's going on with the college scams. That's just been all in the news lately. Take a moment and check out what's been going on with that. You know, people being paid $10,000 to take SATs and ACT scores, tests and shit for students to get into certain schools. You know, doing this, that, and the third. This whole scam, that's just on a college level. People are doing that shit on an elementary school level. On an elementary school level. Rigging lotteries and shit like that for children to get in certain type of charter schools or private schools or whatever. That shit has always been going on an elementary school level, on a preparatory or middle school level, and on a high school level. It's always been like that. You know, it's good to see that this type of thing is being exposed right now, at least on a higher education level. But mark my words, you're going to start seeing it trickle down where it's going to be exposed on other levels too when it comes to high schools, preparatory or middle schools, as well as elementary schools. You know? Because like I said, statistically, when you just look across the board, the majority of the masses of people are blind, deaf, and dumb. They're blind, deaf, and dumb. And a part of that is because they do not know their origin in this world, which means they lack orientation. They don't have a sense of direction, so they're going to be easily led. You know, one of the greatest things that we can encourage our children to do is draw their own conclusions, to be a scientist of life, to figure out things on their own. Not tell them what to think, but to encourage them how to think. how to think. Because if we're not invested in that type of way, then all we're doing is raising more cogs for this machine and reinforcing the systemic things that we see that's going on that are not changing the landscape of this society in an equitable way. You know? But so yeah, I wanted to just take a moment and just build on some of the things that was on my mind in regards to today's mathematics, today's degree, and how they function in our everyday life. I know some people, they may be under the impression like, oh, you know, mathematics is this abstract thing or whatever. No, they give you a sense of orientation. You know, growing, you think for tomorrow, like, is the 15th, right? So that's knowledge power. So when I get up in the morning, I'm thinking about knowledge power. So even on a psychological level, even considering concepts like this puts you in a totally different arena than somebody that's getting up tomorrow morning listening to that Blueface remix with Cardi B on it. And that's how they waking up in the morning. If that's how they orientate themselves, hey, whatever. But that shit ain't on my mind. That's some, you know. So in that lesson, who was 85%? They're the uncivilized people, poisonous animal eaters. That is equivalent to poison animal because it's not healthy. You know? It's crazy because it's kind of like one of the things that we say in the 5% is the understanding is the best part. You know, when you look at understanding represents the child, right? Because a child or understanding is a manifestation of knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge and wisdom is man and woman. So man and woman manifest a child. They give birth to that. The same way that knowledge and wisdom brings forth understanding. So we say that understanding is the best part because it's a composite of what you know and your wisdom. It's what you see, right? So when you look at the relationship between man and woman in the context of a family, right? That bond replicates itself through the form of another life. That's one of the highest forms of power on the planet. And that's one reason why when you look at our flag, right? You see that flag right there? Okay, hold on. Okay. You see the flag, you see the star, which represents the child, and it has 5 points on it. Power. So one of the highest forms of power on the planet is life. That life is in the form of a child, which is the best part, or the understanding. And when you look at children as being the standard of our behavior, our customs, our responsibilities, our activities, when you look at that, right, there's a lot of things that you may not consider doing simply because you have in mind how that would impact the lives of children. What do I mean by that? Well, before you do something, think about how you would feel or what you would think if either your child did it or your child or children learned that you did it. How would you do the same thing? Would you be invested in certain things if it was exposed to a child? Some people, when you look at, how that would affect children if you engaged in certain activities, some people wouldn't do it. Because considering children, we see the right and the exactness of it. So, another example. sometimes in our rallies or our parliaments, our gatherings, if we are out in a park or a public space or something, and we're building about certain things, right? Alcohol, drugs, other different things, especially if there are children around, that's not right and exact. And a lot of times decisions are made like that because children are being considered, because they're the best part. Sometimes as adults we may not put enough thought into what the children think or how it would impact their lives based upon them being exposed to certain things. And here's the irony of it, right? Some people think that it's not okay for children to be exposed to it, but it's okay for us to be exposed to it, when it has the same negative response. You know, let me go back up and see this question. Do you feel the lack of knowledge is destructively cyclical? The ignorance I see is far greater than previous generations. I would say to that point, Ivan, that on one hand, we are seeing the destruction of, or the atrophy of society. We are seeing a devolution, or society going backwards in terms of standards of civilization, consciousness, you know, on a mass scale, right? At the same time, I always say that where there is a lacking of something, that is also evidence of opportunity. So in our 37th degree in the 1 of 40s, it says, Allah is God in the earth and in the heavens above. He is just and he is true, and there is no unrighteousness in him. But he's not unseen, he is seen and heard everywhere, right? And I bring that up because from the lowest to the highest, you're always going to see evidence of Allah being Lord of all worlds. So even in the bleakest, or the places that demonstrate the most despair, there's always going to be some light of hope. And I think that I have that perspective because I work with youth on a daily basis. And regardless of the things that I see that's going on amongst adults in this society, I always see evidence of opportunity through the eyes of the youth that I deal with every single day. And I have a lot of confidence in them to bring about the type of society that is much more equitable than some of the things that we see today. And I'm actually invested in that. You know, so I have an opportunity to see it in practice, right? So yeah, and I think, you know, on a lot of levels, some of it is cyclical, you know, the lack of knowledge. But again, you know, even when you're talking about it's far greater than previous generations, keep in mind the role of social media and the internet, how as a tool, it amplifies a lot of the things that have always existed in this society, right? So it may give the appearance or the illusion that it may be more greater, but the reality of it is the tool itself can amplify these dysfunctions that have always existed in this society. Let me see. What's the difference between the NGE and the 5%? Well, when a person considers himself a god or an earth, right? Gods and earths are 5%ers, but not every 5%er is a god or an earth. You have some 5%ers that are just civilized people. but they may not be God or in earth, because God and the earth were here before some civilized people actually came on the planet. So all gods and earths are 5%ers, but not all 5%ers are a god or in earth. Y'all got any more questions? So yeah, I was talking about the lessons, right? So knowing the lessons, it's not just about reciting them in your head or being able to quote them. You have to be able to apply them to life. You have to, a lesson is something that you learn. It's a learning tool. So the lesson itself has to have some practical information that you could apply to your everyday life, or else it's a relic. It has no use. So anytime that you hear a person talking about, oh, I don't deal with the lessons or something like that, or blah, 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 that's because they're not equipped or don't have the capacity to draw the lesson from that experience. Is the black woman equal to man? If you got to ask that question, then I would encourage you to invest more time around some women. Because if you really invested genuine time around women and had a healthy respect for women, that wouldn't even be a question that you would ask. You know? So you shouldn't have to ask anything like that. All right, y'all, bae. Peace. I just answered your question. My response was, that's something that you have to answer for yourself, is if that's a question that you have. That's not a question for me. I hope you understand what I'm actually saying. Meaning, if you have to ask a question like that, then you need some more life experience and genuine relationships with women, so that you have an opportunity to see them for who they are and their value. Because if you have to question whether or not them as a human being are equal to you as another human being, just take the gender specifics off the table. We're talking about human beings, right? So as men and women, just as human beings, you know, we're of equal value. No one's more valuable than someone else. In order for you to even reproduce life, like I just explained about knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, for you to even to replicate yourself or to create another generation, there has to be, even on a reproductive level, a sense of equity. So no one's more valuable or important than the other. You know, that type of conversation is something that I think is divisive when it comes to what we need to be doing as a family in order to build stronger communities. Peace, Shabon. As men and women, we have different roles and responsibilities, but no one is more valuable or important, you know, than the other human being. So when I'm talking about equality, I'm talking about fairness. I'm talking about homeostasis. I'm talking about balance. I'm talking about equity. In order for us to have a relationship with one another that's healthy, there has to be a sense of fairness. There has to be a sense of equity or investment in that relationship, and some homeostasis, some balance, or it's going to be dysfunctional, because you may have one partner thinking that they're more important or more valuable than the other. That's no, hell nah. You know, when you look at our universal flag, right? This universal flag shows you balance. There are various different roles and responsibilities. You know, the 5% of those who acknowledge their culture. No doubt. No doubt, G. Peace. But we definitely have to be looking through the lens of equity. You know what I mean? We're all valuable. We're all important. No one's more valuable. No one's more important than anybody else. You know, even when you're thinking about this whole idea of the 85%, regardless if a person is deaf, dumb, or blind, or they easily led in the wrong direction, or they poisonous animal eaters, they uncivilized, that just because you may know a little something, it doesn't mean that you're more important or more valuable than anybody. You know, doesn't matter what station you are or think that you are in life, or your social status, none of that matters. You know, all lives must be valued equally and treated that way. That's what equality is. You know, let me tell you about an experience that I had on, what day was that? Sunday, right? I was at the Underground Railroad Heritage Center, right? And those of you who've been checking out my page and stuff, you probably see that I do some interviews from time to time talking about my ancestry in terms of the Underground Railroad with Josiah Henson, who Harriet Beecher Stowe used as the foundation for her book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. So there's a life-size giant cutout of me inside of the Heritage Center, and I'm rocking my universal flag, right? So you see it when you come in there, right? But if the man and woman are equal, who guides who? That is a situational question, right? What do I mean by that? If there are certain arenas in life or certain domains that represent where a woman has more of a presence, right? Motherhood, for example. Things surrounding what she does as a mother, especially when it comes to nursing, all of the different things that involve child rearing, right? A smart man would understand that in that arena, she leads because that is her strong suit. She's the guy when it comes to child rearing when a child is at a certain age. A smart man would understand that. So being a guide and whatever, you know, you're referring to, those aren't fixed positions or states. You know, there may come a time, if you say you're in business with your partner, your wife, your queen, whatever you call her or refer to her as. Say you're in business with her. There may be certain arenas where in order to to ensure that you get a certain contract or things need to be done, she needs to be the guide when it comes to that particular arena. A smart man would understand that. But then also a smart woman would understand that, hey, he needs to lead or he needs to be the guide when it comes to this particular arena. So it's mutable. It's not fixed. It's something that's situational, and it's based upon who is best qualified and has the capacity to guide when it comes to whatever arena in life that you're dealing with or whatever situation that you're dealing with. So if a person has this notion that I'm the man, I just need to guide and lead, you're gonna have a real difficult role, because by nature there are certain things as a man that you are not qualified to guide a woman in a particular area. That's not your strong suit. And it doesn't take away from you. You know what I mean? It's just women have certain things that come more natural to them when it comes to different arenas in life, and vice versa. With men, there are certain things that come a little bit more natural to men in certain arenas in life. It's not fixed. There are certain things that are more well-defined or demarcated. But there's other things you need to allow her to speak first. You know, it may be a situation where there's an arena with some women or whatever, and she needs to be the guide. She needs to be the ambassador representing your family, engaging other women. That's where some dudes be at fault. I see that shit a lot of times, because some of us have this damn mentality that we always the sharpest pencil in the box, when that shit ain't true. Sometimes the woman is sharper and she needs to lead in a certain arena when it comes to engaging other women. You need to sit your ass down. So you say it depends on how they were designed by the Supreme Being. I didn't say all of that. I ain't saying all of that. I'm just saying be smart enough to know when you need to sit your ass down and let her take the lead in a certain situation. That's all. And she needs to be smart enough to sit her ass down when it's time for you to take the lead in a certain situation. It's just that simple. It's not complicated. It's just recognizing that in certain arenas in life, one person has more of a capacity to best serve the needs of the family. And you have to be able to figure that out and not allow ego, misogyny, misandry, whatever the hang-ups are to get in the way from doing what is necessary for the family. It's just that simple. It doesn't take away from her. It doesn't take away from him. It adds to the family. It adds to the family. So going back to what I was saying about I was at the museum. Yo, so one white dude went in there and he came out front, and he was like, what the fuck does, and I'm saying how he said it, what the fuck does in the name of Allah got to do with this? What the fuck is that? He was loud too. He came out of what? Referring to seeing the thing with me with my universal flag on and stuff like that. What the fuck is this? What the fuck does in the name of Allah got to do with any of this stuff? You know, and he was talking about Islam and stuff, and, you know, terrorists and all this other stuff. And I looked, I smiled, and I said, so have you, and this is the tone of voice that I had. So, do you draw the same conclusion when it comes to, you know, like Christians when they've committed terroristic acts? And I know that isn't an indictment on the religion, because I know that there's good Christians that don't do that. But, you know, do you draw the same conclusion when it comes to Christians that commit horrific acts like that against humanity? I disarmed the shit out of this motherfucker. He didn't know what to say after I said that. So we got into a very meaningful dialogue about that perspective of not painting people with a broad brushstroke and recognizing that in various different groups of people, you're going to have people that may be extremists that do some things that are not reflective of the core principles and the values that others may hold fast to. And you can't indict the general body or the whole group based on the acts of a few. We just had a nice conversation, and I disarmed this motherfucker. I was sitting there thinking in my mind like, yo, I think I need to go into hostage negotiation or something. Because I took that shit down. Just a simple response to what he was saying, you know? And why am I telling you this? Knowledge culture, right? Culture is the sum total of people's activities. So culture encompasses everything: a person's language, their diet, how they define their family relationships, perspectives on child rearing, how they dress or the professions that they are into, if they have religion, if they're not into religion, if it's spirituality or metaphysical, or if it's just secular. Every aspect of your people activities represents your culture or your way of life, right? Knowledge is a compound word. Knowledge is composed of know and ledge. So when I engage this person, because I am a scientist of life and I study the science of everything, I'm always learning. Every single day I'm invested in reading and learning about various different perspectives because I never know who I'm going to come in contact with. So I'm always investigating various different perspectives when it comes to the science of everything in life, which means that I am equipped to be able to take people to the ledge of what they know. That's knowledge. So when he made those comments, I just took him to the ledge of what he knew. I asked him a question where he had to draw a conclusion, and when he looked over the ledge, he had to step back and say, damn, he is right about what he's saying. And when I did that, I was able to pull him into a conversation that was more meaningful and not driven from emotions based upon propaganda that he was seeing on Fox News or reading on social media or whatever. I disarmed him with knowledge of culture. I didn't have to be loud. I didn't have to do all of this. That's knowledge culture manifesting power. I demonstrated power, or my capacity to be able to show a sense of force and influence that was like a green destiny sword in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. If you ever seen that film, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that's just how I hit him. I wasn't real loud and I was just like, boom, boom. So what you think about this? What you think about that? And I toned all that shit down. You know, and it doesn't mean that works with everybody. That's situational. I was able to do it with this person. You know, another scenario or situation may require a different type of approach. But that, what knowledge culture is actually about, when you're studying various different people activities and perspectives that go along with those activities, and you're gaining knowledge or becoming more aware of those different perspectives of life, you're also learning what keys unlock what doors to a person's mind. What you need to say to reach them where they are, as opposed to expecting them to come to you. Because some people may get this very lofty, arrogant ass idea because they know some shit. They think because they got knowledge of culture that they got some kind of power. They powerful, so they talk loud and shit. They always posturing. I call it voguing. They always voguing and shit. You know? And it's funny because people hear the phrase, with great power comes great responsibility. But they don't tell you that that great responsibility also manifests humility. You become much more humble because you recognize the magnitude of the things that you have to respond to based upon your ability. And that ability is knowledge, is what you know. So you're not loud. You're not, you're not out here all like that. You're humble. You're humble because you recognize what comes along with the various different things that you do. And in a very simple way, you realize not to put your damn foot in your mouth or to create more conflict or drama or stress that is already naturally coming along with the path that you choose to walk. If you've seen the film The Matrix, it's kind of like the 85% are I forgot what the one dude's name was, but he was in the Matrix and he was eating that fake ass steak just like, he was just immersed in ignorance. And that's how some people are. They're immersed in it. And the more that you know or the more that you learn, the more responsibility you have, because now that knowledge comes along with what you got to do about it and what you have to do with it. It's not latent. It's not dormant. That potentiality manifests what's actual. You're going to have to do something. So that's responsibility. That's responding to life situations with that ability. So it's crazy because the more that you know, the more that you learn, the wider your aperture is, the greater your perspective becomes when you're just looking at life and you're attending the world. So there are things now that you notice that you didn't even think about before. And now you're responsible for that. Now you're responsible for that. Yeah. So there's a great responsibility that comes along with being a critical thinker. Some people equate critical thinking to free thinking, and that's not the same thing. Yeah, Cypher was his name. How ironic. Yeah, some people strive to equate critical thinking to free thinking. That's not the same thing. Because I see people thinking freely all damn day on my timeline, and it be some bullshit. They thinking free, but that shit is not critical at all. It's ironic because people who consider themselves free thinkers, some of the stuff that they think about is not critical or analytical at all. And they're no better off than the sheeple who don't even have the capacity to think for themselves. Both of them is the 85% at the end of the day. Both of them are. Because the same way you got a person that's a sheeple being corralled into thinking a certain way because they're indoctrinated to a certain religion or belief system or American standards of success, whatever you want to call it, the same way that this person is uncivilized or a savage in the pursuit of happiness, you got some free thinkers that's savages in the pursuit of happiness too. They uncivilized too. They just think I'm free to do this wild shit. Both of them doing some ignorant shit. Both of them are. Look at a person that's in the church or any other house of worship that's being easily led in the wrong direction. And then look at somebody like Kanye West who's talking about they're a free thinker, who's leading people in the wrong direction. Both of them are ignorant. So whether a person is blind, deaf, and dumb, or whatever, or you got people saying that they a free thinker, no, the goal is to be a critical thinker. The goal is to be a critical thinker. So one of the other things I wanted to just build on, which I touched on briefly about understanding being the best part, or being symbolic to the child, also being a representation of power in our flag, because our star has 5 points to it. When you look at knowledge, culture, manifesting power, right? Knowledge and culture, the bridge is understanding. The bridge is understanding. So like I said initially, just because a person knows some shit about culture, it's not going to just magically create some kind of power. Talking loud about culture that you know about, that's not power. That's talking loud. You know what I mean? That ain't power. That's not force or influence. You know what I mean? Some of these people that's you see on Facebook or you see on YouTube and shit like that, that always talking about different type of culture and all this other shit. They own people in their neighborhood might not even know them. And they can't get shit done in their own neighborhood. If they wanted to organize their own neighbors and say, yo, Saturday, let's have a community cleanup, they couldn't even do no shit like that. But they on Facebook and they on YouTube talking about they got all of this knowledge about culture and they powerful. That's bullshit. So knowing about culture or various cultures does not necessarily translate into power. The key, or the bridge between knowledge and culture, is understanding. Seeing things for what they are, not what they appear to be. And like I mentioned earlier, the understanding represents the child is the best part. So if you want to see the manifestation of power, peace, prolific, if you want to really see the manifestation of power, look at the knowledge that a person possesses about culture and their investment in the youth. Their relationship to the best part, to the understanding. Not just what they see, but to children. How are they really invested in the future generation? Because if you don't see that, then obviously whatever they saying that they doing is all powerful, and whatever they saying they know about culture, it's not going to survive the next generation because they're not invested in the next generation. They don't have a youth program. They don't have anything that's invested in the next generation. That is the key. That is the link between knowledge and culture. The youth, the understanding, the best part. And like I said, in our flag, which represents the star, it has 5 points on it. That is the power. So whenever I'm listening to anybody, I don't care who they are, whether it's from a secular perspective, a religious perspective, a metaphysical perspective, I don't care who it is. I'm listening to find out, where is the youth component? How are they orientated or invested in the youth? If I don't hear that, you're not planning for a future. I don't give a fuck how powerful you think that you are or whatever you say you know. You are not invested in the next generation, period. So whatever you're saying can't be as powerful as you trying to present yourself to be. And you see it all the time. You see it all the time. And that's what I would encourage y'all to do. When y'all hear these people talking this bullshit on YouTube or Facebook and they acting like they dropping all this high science, listen and strive to figure out, okay, where are the youth in this? What does this have to do with the children specifically? If you don't hear that, they're really telling you the sense of sustainability of what it is they're talking about. That's what they're really communicating to you. Because if they're not having that conversation, if they're not thinking about how they are invested in the next generation, then whatever they're saying has no place in the next generation. It has a said birth record to it in our language. It's other than what we should be doing, as we say in our language. So I encourage y'all, when you hear people talking and doing all this other shit, think about what does this have to do with our children, our youth? Is this an investment in our next generation? Because if you don't hear that, that's telling you how sustainable that bullshit is that they're talking. Let me take it a step further, right? When you hear conversations and it doesn't involve an investment in family, because in order for you to talk about children and an investment in the next generation, you obviously have to talk about family and family dynamics. Because you cannot create a next generation. You cannot manifest a child if you don't have partnership, if you don't have relationship, if you don't have family. So if you hear people and you don't get a sense of the role and the responsibility and the importance of family in that, it's also telling you how sustainable that bullshit is they talking about. Peace, Jabborn. You know what I'm saying? So going back to what I was saying, knowledge culture doesn't just automatically manifest power. There's other elements that need to be present in order for that to take place. Power, like I said earlier, when you're looking at it in a societal sense, is force and influence. Politicians or public officials leverage power. They really don't have nothing but their ability to craft policies that directs resources or power dynamics where you live. If you don't know who's who in the zoo and the roles that they play and the responsibilities in that capacity of a public official, person that's supposed to be serving you, then you're not in the position to have any sense of say-so in how those power dynamics are shaping your landscape where you live. You're not in that conversation. And like I said many times, if you're not at that table, you on the menu. You're on the menu. So yeah, I just wanted to take a moment and just go in and just build on the math, build on the alphabet. And I willed at some of the things that I was adding on about, that I shared it in a very clear way so that you can take that and practically apply it to your life. You know, that's really the goal of my culture of the 5%. It's not to be abstract. It's not to be all above people's head and to be doing all of this razzle-dazzle bullshit. It's to put things in a practical sense that a person can walk away with that and put it into practice immediately. Immediately. So when we say 5%, 5 represents power in our mathematics. So that's really today's mathematics. Knowledge, culture, being born, the power. You know? What's your overall favorite book? Broken Wings by Khalil Gibran. Yeah. That's my favorite book. You know? Those of y'all that willfully you will be down to the Allah School on the 30th for the unveiling of the renaming of the the street that's in proximity to our school. A lot of justice in the 5% square. I'm going to be down there as well at the Common Unity Center, which is within the Allah School. I'm going to be teaching a class on that day, on the 30th, at around the understanding hour. So I'm going to be down there. So willfully, those of y'all that will be there to celebrate the renaming of the streets in our honor will also be there to be able to add on to the class that I'm going to be teaching. And I'm going to be building about community engagement. Some of the things that I'm building about right now, but more in a specific way of things that you can actually do in terms of community engagement. You know, right now I'm kind of building on the math and the alphabet, as well as the 1 to 40, knowledge coach degree. But when I teach my class, I'm going to be building on the math and the alphabet, as well as 120. But I'm going to be talking more specifically about just community engagement, like what you can actually do within your community. And I think one of the challenges with many of our people is when you look at knowledge culture being born to power, right? A lot of people, when you just look at them every day, just look at people, and you get a sense that people don't feel as if they have the capacity or the power to change their situation. So if a person doesn't really think that they have the capacity or the power to change their situation, then they're definitely not going to think that they have the capacity or the power to change what's going on in their community, in their city, in their county or region. It's a little bit unrealistic to expect something like that when a person really needs to have a sense of being able to edify who they are first and foremost, when it comes to just recognizing their own capacity or ability to do something. And just everyday people, when you just look at them, you can tell that they may not feel as if they can change what's going on around them. You know what I'm saying? So the beauty of my culture in particular, and I'm sure other people that live various different type of cultures can also relate, is I recognize how knowing the principles and the values that I live by empowers me or empowers others to make a difference, not only in their own life, but in the life of their family members and as well as in their community. So those are some of the things that I'm going to be building about when I'm at the school, and giving techniques and practical examples of how people can be more involved in their communities as agents of change, as opposed to being reactionary and watching what's just going on around them. Knowing culture or knowing your way of life should be used in that type of way where you are empowered to make a difference in your family and in your community. Because if not, then that is a system of principles and values that are not sustainable. These are things that are not going to last another generation. They shouldn't last another generation if they're not serving any purpose of empowerment. And we have to be able to critically examine those type of things in terms of how we live. So knowledge culture is also doing the knowledge or being aware of how we live, what's working and what ain't working. A lot of times people don't want to be honest about that shit. And then when they don't see a sense of force or influence in their life, they don't want to be honest about, man, maybe I need to change the way I live in some ways. Maybe I need to cut back on certain things that I'm indulging in. Or maybe I need to change my diet around a little bit. Or maybe I need to change who I'm associating with. Or maybe I need to change my career path. You know, you have to be open, honest, and courageous enough to make those type of adjustments. But it's going to be difficult to do that if you're not increasing your knowledge or your foundation in terms of expanding your sense of awareness of how you even live in to begin with. You know? God, is it important to know if it's power or power refinement? Power, if you're looking at it as the truth, doesn't need refinement. It's the truth. But you may need it because you may not be the truth. When you're on this journey of learning about yourself, there are things that you're going to discover that have just not been true that you've been doing. And that's just naturally something that comes along with the territory because we grow up in a society where we've been indoctrinated. There's going to be an unlearning process. And when we discover some of those things that just are not true that we've been doing, then some refinement is going to have to take place. The truth itself or the power doesn't need refinement, but we do. So refinement means to beautify. It also means to remove impurities. If you're looking at it in a social context, refinement is etiquette. You know, a great example of refinement is like Felicia Rashad. You know, when you look at her mannerisms, how she moves, not just in acting capacity, but even when you look at her just in general interviews or other different aspects, that is how she moves. Right? Yeah, refinement is in the meaning of civilization. You know? So, in terms of truth, the truth is the truth. You can't add to it or take away from it. It is what it is. But we may need to take that truth and improve upon ourselves. Remove certain impurities. Purify certain things about us. Develop ourselves in a certain type of way. We need to do that. You know? So that's not really a debate or an argument or whatever, you know, that sometimes people want to get into, like, yo, mine say power refinement, whatever. Are you doing better? And are you being a resource to other people? That's all I'm concerned with. You know what I mean? I got any other questions? You know, sometimes I look back. How do you feel is the best way to explain the public education system to our youth in order to give them to have a better understanding? Well, I think the best way is to ask them what they think about it. If you ask our youth what they think about school, what they think about the teachers, what they think about certain subjects, they're going to give it up. They're going to tell you everything about it. When you do that, you can meet them where they are because they're sharing with you their understanding. So when they do that, you add on knowledge to that cipher based upon what they share with you. Because when they share it with you, you know exactly where they are. You don't have to speculate or strive to figure out, what I need to tell them and shit. They're telling you what it is. They may be accurate. They may not be accurate. That's on you to add knowledge on to their cipher. But you ask them about what's going on. And in the process of adding knowledge on to their cipher, you can introduce them to different things that may be outside of that perspective that they have based upon their personal experience. What do I mean by that? They may think that whatever they're dealing with at that school is what they have to accept. They may not know that they have other options. They may not know that, all you need to do is just talk to your parent, and then they can come in and get you transferred into another classroom. Since you're having those difficulties or whatever, and, you're just not really having a good relationship with that particular teacher, they may not know that they have that as an opportunity. They may think that they have to accept that. But you wouldn't know knowledge cipher to add knowledge onto their cipher like that if you didn't sit and listen to what it is that they were saying about what's going on. So if you want to know about the public education, and the best way to explain it, ask the people who are in public education to explain it to you. And then from there, you can kind of fine tune or share with them some perspective on what it is that you know about public education. Do the 85 and the 10 exist on Allah's nation? Shielding their ways under our flag, and what should the true and living do? Me personally, I definitely recognize that there are the 85 and the 10% and the 5% within the 5%. I definitely recognize that. And you have some people who think that this culture is a social club. They really don't know shit. They're not here to do no work. They don't really give a fuck about the youth. They got some fancy sounding name and they feel confident about it. They're not here for anything productive, And you have some who are here to strive to take advantage of other people. They are the 85% and the 10% within the 5%. And as a true and living, what I do is I stay true and I keep living. And I keep teaching the youth. So willfully, as I continue to do the things that I do, that I can continually function as an example in a positive way of how this culture can be expressed. Not individually, but as just one manifestation or one example of this culture that is commendable. And sometimes I get frustrated with it. I see people that be on some bullshit and they using the name and the flag to shield their dirty religion. I see that. And I see some people who treat this like a social club. They don't really know nothing. They just as ignorant as the 85%. They the 5% that's ignorant. And I see that too. And it could be frustrating sometimes. Because I'm constantly striving to move the culture forward. But yet you see, some of these people that's like, what the fuck is y'all doing? You know what I'm saying? And it can be frustrating sometimes. It can definitely be frustrating. But as a true and living, you just have to remain true and just keep living. That's all that I can do. And I'm going to continue to do that. And willfully, people who are observant enough, they will recognize things that people like me and others are doing that are exemplary in terms of the way the culture needs to be manifested. And look at that in comparison to people who are out here bullshitting. And it's challenging because sometimes I'll be wanting to call people out by name and saying, you on some bullshit. I mean, if people strive to come sideways or whatever, then I do it that way. But typically, I don't really be pointing fingers and stuff like that and be talking about people, because we don't talk about each other and we don't talk about people who are outside of the culture. We don't gossip. You know, we strive to talk about things in principle. So if I'm talking about people doing things a certain type of way, I'm talking about it in principle. It doesn't matter who it is. You know what I'm saying? And in doing that, I trust that people are intelligent enough to recognize who's genuine, who's really doing this in terms of being invested in our youth, striving to make sure that our families have a positive example of things that we should be doing to continue the legacy of our people. I trust that people are intelligent enough to recognize what that is in comparison to people who are out here bullshitting. You know? I asked because we gave the devil a chance. Why not make those study 35 to 50 years? You can't make nobody do nothing, especially a grown-ass adult. You know? You have to be true and continue living. You can't make no grown-ass adult do anything. What you can do is just not fuck with people. That's what you can do. And that may be what your solution is. Trying to force some grown-ass adult to do something may not be the best thing. True indeed. So your blood is not required in thy hand. So the God right there that's speaking about you let them die in their own iniquity, he's referencing Ezekiel 3:18. Which is basically a part of one of our lessons. If a civilized person does not perform his duty, which teaches civilization to others, you know, he shall be punished with a severe punishment. You know what I mean? Even though I'm not NGE, I highly respect the knowledge, and it helps me better understand my surroundings. Okay, now peace. You gonna be down at the school for the unveiling of the renaming of our streets? Because I'm gonna be down there as well. Ivan, so you're saying that you highly respect the knowledge and it helps me better understand my surroundings. True indeed, bro. And that is really the goal of what we do as a 5%. Our goal is not to be out here trying to make people 5%ers. Our goal is to elevate the level of civilization of anybody that is around us. Anybody. So it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. If you're in contact with me or any of my brothers and sisters, then we should be an asset in your life, not a liability. We should be able to help you improve whatever it is that you're doing. Yep. That's why we teach civilization first. True indeed. So Ivan, in one of our degrees, the 18th degree in one of the 40s, it asked the question, what is the duty of a civilized person? And the answer is, the duty of a civilized person is to teach he who is savage civilization, righteousness, the knowledge of himself, the science of everything in life, love, peace, and happiness. You know what I'm saying? Not all at one time, but when you develop a relationship with people, you find out where they're at and what you can do to help them improve their life. So you don't go in there with some expectations of what it is that you need to give them. You go into a person's life and you develop a relationship striving to figure out what you can help draw out of them. Sometimes they may need a little bit more civilization. Sometimes they may have that down. And you need to emphasize righteousness with this person. You know? It's various different aspects to that. You know? Teaching knowledge of self is a choice of that person. I can't choose that for no one. Everyone has freedom of choice. True indeed, now peace. Yep. So we live our life and we strive to be an asset and a resource to other people. People are going to grow and develop regardless just by being in proximity to us if they really value the principles and the values that they see that we express. If not, that's their choice. We're not missionaries, you know. It's like I tell people, our 13th letter in our alphabet is M. That stands for master, right? And a master is one who has knowledge and understanding, right? At the same time, if you've ever watched a Kung Fu movie, you never seen no master walking around the village tapping people on the shoulder talking about, you want to learn my special technique? And then showing off and shit like that about how masterful you are in this technique. You never seen no master doing no shit like that. You never seen that. You see them coming into the village, you know, humble, you know, getting their vegetables and stuff like that at the market or whatever, going to the spot to sip some tea or do whatever, and they go right back to where they live. And the people that want to learn, they pay attention and they will find that person. But there's also a level of respect for that master among the people who live in that village. But that master is not walking around bullying people or all egotistically invested on, yo, you want to learn my technique? You want to learn my technique? No, that ain't a master. That's not no master. So the 5% is the same way. We live the same kind of way. No, we not out here. We not missionaries. We ain't trying to convince nobody. When I'm building like this, or I'm doing the animation, or writing articles, or videos, or writing books, and all this other stuff, I'm not out here trying to convince people of shit. Yeah. I ain't trying to convince people of nothing. These are some of the things that I've researched, things that I've experienced. I think that it's valuable enough to share with the human family, and I make it accessible. If some people value it, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. But what I'll tell you is when I leave this physical plane, when I go back to essence, I have committed myself to making sure that this world is going to be a better place than when I first arrived here. And that I'm leaving a legacy behind so that my children can continue that legacy. You know? That's a part of my purpose. And it's through this culture that I've been able to actually ascertain my purpose. So, the one brother that was talking about power or power refinement, it's the same thing when people say culture or culture freedom, right? Culture is culture. At the same time, your culture should have a degree or a sense of freedom about it. So, you can live your culture, but you better have a sense of freedom when it comes to that culture. And that doesn't mean trespassing against other people or encroaching upon the rules and the laws of other people. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about doing whatever the fuck you want to do, right? I'm talking about freedom within the parameters of your principles and your values. You live in your life which is in accord with the other members of the human family as well as your responsibility to the planet Earth within the context of the world. Within the context of the world. Some people don't have all of that shit together. Right? They don't even got their relationships sound with other human family members. So when it comes to how they treat the planet, that's fucked up too. Which means that they really don't even know how to function within the context of a world or a society. So you gotta have all of those different things in order. Making sure that you have equitable relationships with other human family members. Recognizing your relationship to the planet Earth. Meaning that you have to have a conservationist approach, or you have to preserve this planet. And then taking that perspective and operating within the context of a world which may not take into consideration the importance of those relationships with human family members and a relationship to the planet Earth. It's challenging to function in that capacity. It's challenging, but we do it every day. We do it every day. You know? But yeah, if y'all don't got any other questions, I'm about to tune out. But I definitely appreciate y'all for taking a moment to just listen to what it is that I wanted to share this evening in regards to today's mathematics and today's degree in the 1 to 40s, who was at 85%. But yeah, if you came in a little later, I definitely encourage you to go back to the foundation, just to do knowledge on the different territory that I was covering when it comes to today's mathematics and today's degree. All right, y'all. I'm out. Peace.